It's 3 minutes till supposedly go time, but why don't we just go ahead and get started? Because I think the room looks good and you all are getting very good under your instructions of getting ready to go. So with that being said, welcome. And welcome to the United States Access Board's Town Hall meeting here in Baltimore. My name is Greg Ferrybach, and I am a public member for the state of Indiana. And I'm proud to serve as chair of the United States Access Board, the only federal agency dedicated to the access design for people with disabilities. It's an honor for me today just to join you here in Baltimore, and I want to thank everyone who is here for taking the time out of your busy schedules to, one, help us set this town hall meeting up, and two, take the time out of your busy day just to attend and participate. And I think it's very important to use that participation. Many of you are signed up for comment, and we'll be looking forward to that later on in the agenda. It is our first town hall meeting in Baltimore, and we're thrilled. We also want to thank our hosts today, the National Federation of the Blind, for hosting us in this, what we consider a beautiful facility. We're just thrilled and awed by what the Federation for the Blind has done, and very, very grateful for their time and hospitality. That included lunch too, so thank you, especially to the kind people that helped serve us today and share the meal. So please give them our gratitude. The Access Board. The Access Board has a mission to create the United States of America that is accessible for everyone, regardless of ability. Our town hall meeting helps us gather information directly from you, the public, about the state of accessibility in each of your individual communities. This year, we are here to learn about accessibility in Maryland. Yesterday, the board visited the brand new Chesapeake Bay Region Accessible Boating Center, which is in Annapolis. And off the record, Annapolis is probably one of my most favorite towns in America. And so I take the time to rattle off my menu that I like there, but that's not on my script. The Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating, or CRAB, is an organization dedicated to providing recreational sailing opportunities for people with disabilities. CRAB consulted very extensively with the Access Board technical staff on accessibility of the state-of-the-art facility during the design phase, and we were truly impressed with what we saw. The CRAB facility is a great example of what happens when you design a facility to be accessible to all. The facility is more usable by everyone, not just people with disabilities. So congratulations, really a heartfelt congratulations to CRAB and to the state of Maryland, for which has had a big hand in the funding of this unique facility. And by note of aside, accessibility in water is difficult for people with disabilities, so CRAB has done a fabulous job and with that recreational opportunity. This morning we've also had the opportunity to tour the National Federation of the Blind headquarters, a very impressive facility that goes beyond the current standards to provide accessibility for all people with disabilities. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and we commend their efforts towards accessibility. All right, our main goal is to listen to you, and that really is our goal today. We want to hear your perspective on the state of accessibility in your local community. We want to know what changes and challenges you are having, and we would love to hear about accessibility successes that might serve as a model for other people in the room and other people who are listening in on our electronic access. So thank you for joining us, and we want to have a good conversation. Even if you didn't sign up, and I know a few of you didn't, we are going to be here to have you provide your remarks. So we will have you in the agenda and the itinerary as that public comment session continues. All right, so before going any further, I want to provide some information about the building facilities for those who are not here in person, which we have a lot on the Zoom aspect. To find accessible restrooms, you can go to and from the main entrance of this room, making a left and then making another left. The bathroom will be on your right. You may also exit the room through the door on my right, turn right down the hallway, and then turn right again. The bathroom will be on the left. That's confusing. I've been lost twice. But there's great people out there that kind of point you in the right direction. And your trip, if you do get lost or find your way, is really very, very attractive. So look around and see how well the Federation did setting that opportunity up. Also, the emergency exits are located outside the room, our room, just past each of the elevators on the left and right-hand side. There are a total number of 2 evacuation chairs, 1 on each side, right before the staircase. So that's kind of the setup for the day. If you have any questions, we also have our team members around the room. Please just ask them, as well as folks from the other part of our hosts today. So enjoy. It's now time to have me introduce, or actually I'm going to have each of the board members of the United States Access Board introduce themselves who are present today. And why don't we go ahead? I'm going to start over here, and we're going to circle around. Actually, we're going to square off around and begin. So, Benjamin, I'll have you lead. Your name and where you're from, sir.
Sounds good. Thanks, Greg. Benjamin Nadolski, Knoxville, Tennessee, public member.
Carmen Jones, Atlanta, Georgia, public member.
Debbie Ryan, I guess maybe former public member as of today, from Boston.
Karen Tamley, public member, Chicago.
Karen Breitmeyer, public member from Seattle, Washington.
Elber Ariza Silva, public member, Washington, D.C.
Maddie Rivolo, public member from Oakland, California.
Stephanie Enyard, public member from Arlington, Virginia.
Heather Dowdy, public member from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hello, I'm Katie Kale. I am representing the U.S. General Services Administration, and I'm also vice chair of the U.S. Access Board.
Greg.
Sachin Pavitran, Executive Director, Access Board staff.
Chris Kaczynski, General Counsel, U.S. Access Board, from about 10 minutes away in Mount Vernon, Baltimore.
Hi there, I'm Alexis Kasher, public member from New York.
Whichever one comes first.
Hi, I'm Hannah Ibanez, public member from Los Angeles, California.
Good afternoon, Larry Beat, liaison from the U.S. Department of Commerce and also from Baltimore.
Sloan Farrell, liaison from the U.S. Department of the Interior, and I am from Gambrills.
All right. Thank you all. As you can see, it's quite a diverse group, and we are, I think we're getting younger. So I think that's a good thing. Just kidding, ladies. All right, we're now going to have some remarks from the National Federation of the Blind. And in doing so, I'm going to introduce to you Mark Rubicano, who is the president of the National Federation of the Blind, and his team, which are dedicated for opening their space for us today. Mark?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the board and staff of the Access Board, and to those who are here as guests for the town hall and who are participating online. It's truly a pleasure to have you here at the National Federation of the Blind. Most often when we have blind people come, we say welcome home, because this is a space built and directed by blind people, and since you all are dedicated to the integration of people with disabilities into society, I'll say welcome home to you as well. It's truly a pleasure to have this gathering, I think the first ever, at the National Federation of the Blind headquarters. Our organization is a membership organization dedicated to the integration of the blind into society. I'd like to tell people, if you don't remember anything else, remember the word of. It's the most important word in our name. We are led and directed by blind people from affiliates in each of the 50 states, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. This being our national headquarters, it is known the world over as a space to bring blind people together and have substantive discussions about where blind people want to go in society, and we really appreciate the opportunity to host this town hall, and we appreciate the work that we're able to do along with other disability rights organizations, both to share our unique perspective, but to learn from the wisdom of other people with disabilities. You know, in coming to this meeting today, I'm both inspired and hopeful as we approach the 33rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act tomorrow, but you know, very cognizant of the fact that we all have a lot of work to do together. Very excited that today, as a matter of fact, the administration is announcing the release of the NPRM regarding web accessibility rules that we have been advocating for over a decade, right? Over a decade. So well aware that progress happens, but it's because we all keep pushing. And I think the work that this board in particular is doing to push on those issues and amplify those elements that make it normal for people with disabilities to be actively involved in all aspects of society, especially as we move into this digital age where artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, so many other aspects of life are going to need the authentic wisdom of people with disabilities. So really appreciate the forward-looking work of this group. One last thing I'd like to say in closing, because I think it speaks to the future. This building has been our headquarters now since 1978, and we have made a public commitment going forward to the next aspect of what we intend to do from this building. We are currently in a capital campaign to raise money to establish the Museum of the Blind People's Movement. This will be the first national cultural institution dedicated to telling the stories of individual blind people and how those blind people have worked together in a movement to help change society and raise expectations for blind people. In this building we have over 20,000 square feet of archive space of correspondence, the history of the organized blind movement, the work that has been done along with other disability organizations, our disability rights work through our Jacobus Tenbrook Disability Law Symposium, so many other pieces of nothing without us. So I invite all of you to be part of that, because our membership, our blind membership, has made a real commitment to not just having a museum, but our membership has been very clear that if we're going to have a museum in this building, it has to be radically inclusive and accessible to everybody. That means this building, the second floor of this building, where we're in the next 5 years going to open this museum, will be the most inclusive cultural institution, we believe, anywhere in the world, and will be a model for professionals in the museum world to come and learn about how to do inclusion and accessibility right. That means we're going to need the help of the United States Access Board to be radically inclusive and push the envelope on that. And we hope that you will use that future museum as a place to send people to show how to go beyond the standards to do inclusion in a way that isn't being done. I also bring that up to say we need your help, we need your ideas, we need your content, and we hope that this will be a model for other disability rights, historical and forward-looking efforts in the future. Really pleased to have you here, and we look forward to a great afternoon ahead, and thank you for your service and leadership to this nation regarding accessibility and people with disabilities.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. We all appreciate your efforts and your hospitality. All right, now it's my pleasure to introduce an individual from the state of Maryland whose presence here demonstrates absolutely what disabilities, access, and inclusion means in the great state of Maryland. And so with that being said, I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Governor Miller and for your remarks. So Governor, it's your floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gregory. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Aruna Miller. I am Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. And again, I want to welcome you on behalf of Governor Westmore, myself, our entire administration. So first off, I'd like to thank President Rick Obono. Thank you for those remarkable remarks you just made. And I am so excited to be radically inclusive, right? Aren't we all ready for that moment? Really, very much thank you for your leadership at the National Federation of the Blind, and the idea of having a museum here that is radically inclusive is exactly what we would like to work towards. And I know that you mentioned that we worked on certain pieces of legislation, and it may take a decade in the making. But one thing I'll remind every one of us here, no matter what our mission is and our goals are, remember that the road to progress is always under construction, right? There is no final destination for where we need to be. We have to continue to build to make sure that we create a more inclusive state for all. And that work will never cease. So I thank all of you for your part in making the state of Maryland so much more inclusive. And Governor Moore and I look forward to partnering with all of you in the next 4 years. I also want to recognize the Executive Director of U.S. Access Board, Dr. Pavi Thran. Thank you for your leadership. And I think we have a celebration here today. I believe the U.S. Access Board will be celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Is that not right?
That is right.
Yeah, congratulations on that. So we have lots of celebrations today, not only the 50th celebration of the U.S. Access Board, but the 33-year celebration of the Americans with Disability Act, as well as this month celebrating Disability Pride Month, right? Yeah. So much to celebrate, so much work to do, really glad to be here. And finally, I also want to recognize the tremendous leadership of Secretary Beatty from the Maryland Disability Act right here. Really thank you so much for you and your team for your leadership. And let me tell you, 2 months ago I had the pleasure of visiting the Department of Disabilities, and I met some of the most hardworking, most passionate, compassionate individuals that I've ever met before. And if nothing speaks to the mission of the Moore-Miller administration to leave no one behind, it's the Department of Disabilities. and their great work. So I want to recognize all the people here, Team DOD, that really makes our state very inclusive, from John Brennan to Lisa Belcastro to Kim McKay. And there are some secretaries that's also here. Secretary Emily Keller is here. So lots of folks that build this great state and make our department to serve the people with disabilities in the best way we possibly can. So thank you so much, Secretary Beatty. And I just want to give you a couple of bragging rights on Secretary Beatty. I don't know if you all know, but she was inducted into Howard County's Women's Hall of Fame and the Daily Records Maryland Top 100 Women. So can we give it up for Secretary Beatty? It is such an honor to work beside you, Secretary Beatty. And again, I want to say how important making sure everyone in the state of Maryland feels inclusive. The biggest mission of the Moore-Miller administration, it is to leave no one behind. And we have already, during the first 6 months, worked on legislation that speaks to this. But I want to say that, look, in this nation, there are 1 in 4 people suffer with or have disabilities. And this is not just a minority population. This is a rather large population that we need to meet the needs of. And regardless whether it's only a small percentage, whether it's one person or lots of people, we have to be able to meet the needs of individuals with disabilities. That is really why we're here, is to open doors, provide greater access. And one of the things that we did during the first 6 months is pass legislation, the child tax credit, to expand that so it includes children under the age of 17 with disabilities. Right? So that will provide more opportunities, more money to individuals that have children with disabilities. We are also working to reimagine state government. In the past 8 years or so, there's been 2,000 positions in the state government that have been eliminated, and the vacancy rate has doubled in the past decade. Now, it's important that we have leaders and representatives in state government, because Marylanders deserve the best. And in order to get the best, we need to be able to staff state government so we have the best and the brightest to be able to deliver these services. And we're also much aware that over 56% of those with disabilities are unemployed right now. And in that, along with that, we have over 62% that are Black Marylanders that are unemployed. And we need to be able to work towards creating more job opportunities for those with disabilities. And I've already spoke with Secretary Beatty before when I met with her and her team, that I would love to see the state government, every single department, to be able to hire those with disabilities. That has to be the starting point, because we know talent is out there. We know every individual, regardless of abilities, has talent and can provide great diverse thought to our great state. So we're looking forward to working together with you. We know there's a lot more work to do. Governor Moore and our entire administration wants to be partners with all of you. We want to make sure that you can live your life to the fullest extent possible and be able to contribute to the great state of Maryland in your own unique way with your own talents. So thank you for having me here. And at this moment, I'd like to present a proclamation from the governor and our team. So I'd like to read this right now. Whereas July 26, 1990, President George H. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disability Act. This act was landmark legislation to protect the civil rights of individuals with disabilities and ensure the same basic freedoms, independence, equal access, freedom of choice, and inclusion are guaranteed for those with disabilities as to every other citizen. Whereas we believe in Maryland which recognizes the unlimited potential for all of our citizens, including those with disabilities, to live, work, and thrive in our communities. Whereas the 33rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act is an opportunity to recognize the importance of ensuring inclusive environments with equal access to communication, education, employment, housing, transportation, and public accommodation. Whereas we are promoting equality of opportunity, access, and choice for Marylanders with disabilities, we are committed to the promise of a Maryland in which all people with disabilities have the knowledge and influence to make a difference in their lives and the lives of others. Now, therefore, I, even though I'm not Wes Moore, but let's pretend he's here right now, I, Wes Moore, Governor of State of Maryland, do hereby proclaim July 26, 2023, a day of observance of the Americans with Disability Act, and recognize our communities are stronger when everyone participates. We commend this observance to all our citizens and encourage them to participate and promote events throughout the year which celebrate the rights and abilities of those with disabilities. The proclamation is signed by Governor Moore, myself, and our Secretary of State, Susan Lee. As we move to hear from all of you, I'm excited for this chance to learn what other opportunities we can take across our administration to incorporate the needs of our historically underserved communities in this critical area. We cannot accomplish this work together without the years of commitment and advocacy many of you have provided to the disability community. So thank you all for coming here and sharing your feedback. And at this moment, I'd like to present this proclamation. You can find it. Ah, there it is. Hit it so well from me. Okay, so I'd like to present this to Secretary Beatty. Here we go.
Very much, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor, for the comments and also for the recognition. Excellent. I'd like to see a raise of hands. Is anybody on the lawn the day 33 years ago when the ADA was signed into law? Two, three, myself, some more. Good, good. Remember, you're part of that history. And so celebrate tomorrow and thank the governor and thank you for your remarks in that celebration today. Governor Beatty, we appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
I'd also like to now take the time to call on Secretary Beatty because I believe she's got some remarks and on this topic. And so, Secretary.
Well, thank you so much. And it's not an easy feat to go after the Lieutenant Governor, who is just fabulous. I don't know if you all know this or not, but Lieutenant Governor Miller has made history in our state. She is the 10th Lieutenant Governor of the state of Maryland, but she's the second woman to serve as Lieutenant Governor, and she's the first woman of color and the first immigrant to serve as Lieutenant Governor. And she is, by education, an engineer, and she served most of her career in public service, making sure that there are opportunities for underserved populations in a county, in a state, and really nationally. So we applaud her history and her continuing in her public service role as our Lieutenant Governor. And just thank you so much for being here today. I just want to say, just take a moment to welcome the U.S. Access Board members to our great state, and to welcome our guest here today. You've come from all over the state of Maryland, and we are anxious to hear what you have to say. And we thank you for taking this time out of your schedule to do this for us. We're thrilled that the board was able to sail. I think you did, right? You sailed the Chesapeake Bay. I was watching the weather in the morning and thinking, oh, I hope it doesn't thunderstorm, because I know that you were looking forward to that, and Crab was looking forward to hosting you. We also I'm so glad that you got a chance to see the Chesapeake Regional Adaptive Boating Center. It is the first in the nation, and we are very proud of it here in Maryland. We are a state and an administration that believes in ensuring inclusion of all Marylanders, including those with disabilities, in all that our state and our community has to offer. I was truly honored that Governor Moore asked me to continue to serve as the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Disabilities, which is the only cabinet-level department focused on cross-disability issues in the nation. It's especially important to have you here this week, hearing from people across our state and region about their accessibility challenges and successes, especially because we are celebrating the 33rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's critical to look back on all that we've accomplished, but also to look forward to things that we still need to do. I'd like to take a moment to thank my fellow cabinet secretaries who are here today and their staff that have joined us. We have Secretary Wu from the Department of Labor, and we have Special Secretary Keller, whom the Lieutenant Governor announced. She's with our Opioid Operational Command Center. And also Kate Breen, who is our Acting Director of the Governor's Office for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And I want to thank also our commission members, the Commission on Disability members who are here today as well. So please don't scoot out right after the public hearing, because the department is hosting a reception, and we'd love for you to join us. And it's in the next room, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We appreciate it. Excellent. We're going to shift gears just a little bit, and I'm going to introduce you to my colleague, Katie Kale here. Katie is Vice Chair of the United States Access Board, and she's also the Deputy Administrator at the U.S. General Services Administration. Katie, I'll let you introduce what you're going to do and take it from there. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. So hello, everyone. As Greg mentioned, my name is Katie Kale. I use the pronouns she, her, and I am the Deputy Administrator of the U.S. General Services Administration, or GSA. And I am very proud to serve as Vice Chair of the U.S. Access Board. As a visual description, I am a white woman with long light brown hair pulled back halfway today. I'm wearing a white sweater and dark rimmed glasses. So today I'm here in my role as Access Board member, but I'm also representing GSA, and that is fitting because if any federal agency can really speak to the impact of the Access Board on accessibility within the federal government over the last 50 years, it's GSA. GSA owns and leases over 363 million square feet of space and 8,397 buildings in more than 2,200 communities nationwide. Those are a lot of places that GSA has made accessible for people who visit them and work in them every day. And we collaborate closely with the Access Board to make sure that we are doing that right. I definitely want to highlight GSA's work delivering services that are simple to use, accessible, equitable, protective, transparent, and responsive for all people of the United States. We're focused on physical and digital accessibility. We're pushing for better outcomes in every area that we oversee, and that takes a lot of forms. We incorporate physical accessibility into our buildings, including through our National Accessibility Program and many of the efforts of our chief architect. we've partnered with challenge.gov to launch a program called Access for All, which is universal and accessible design competition for U.S. architecture students. So the next generation of students are going to tell us what our federal offices and federal buildings should look like and how we should make sure that they are accessible. And to make sure that we are sourcing these really up-and-coming best practices. We're also focused on advancing digital accessibility through federal technology. And two big examples of that are, one, through our Office of Government-Wide Policy IT Accessibility Team, which helps agencies meet federal compliance standards. But also, we have a U.S. web design service that offers toolkits and best practices to ensure that our federal partners, our sister agencies, are making sure that their federal websites are accessible for everyone. That includes being able to use multiple languages and providing specific resources to supply customers of varying socioeconomic communities. Overall, we're intent on ensuring better, more equitable end-user experiences in the physical spaces, as well as the technology products and services that millions of Americans rely on. I'm very proud of the work that we've done and the work that we'll continue to do to ensure that the federal government is meeting Americans where they are and providing them with the services that they need when they need them. So, as we've mentioned here today, that this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And while the Rehabilitation Act of the federal law that requires access for people with disabilities to programs and activities that are funded by the federal agencies and prohibit discrimination in federal employment based on disabilities. But the Federal Rehabilitation Act is also the law that established the Access Board. Specifically, Congress created the Access Board to enforce Architectural Barriers Act, so ABA, and that was in 1968. The ABA was groundbreaking law that required buildings that are built or leased on behalf of the federal government to be accessible to people with disabilities. The ABA aimed to make federal government a model of accessibility for the built environment. However, in the years immediately following the passage of the ABA, Congress determined that the ABA needed better enforcement. Thus, the U.S. Access Board was born. Originally known as the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board, it's a mouthful, the Access Board issued and enforced accessibility standards under the ABA by specific federal agencies, including GSA. The original Access Board comprised high-level representatives of 8 federal departments. In addition to ABA compliance, its job was to act as a coordinating body within the federal government on issues of accessibility. Prior to the creation of the Access Board, individual agencies would review and receive and investigate ABA complaints, but the investigations were sparse. Available records from early days show that the Access Board showed that agencies only really handled a few dozen complaints. But after the Access Board was established and appropriately staffed, it began receiving ABA complaints and conducting its own reviews. The board's first complaint, received in 1976, concerned accessibility barriers at 8 interstate highway rest areas in Florida. The Access Board worked with the Department of Transportation so that corrective action was taken. And then the Access Board quickly made its presence known and required corrective action to resolve multiple complaints throughout the country. That included issues in spaces like public housing projects in Richmond, Virginia, a Social Security Administration office in San Leandro, California, as well as Washington, D.C.'s National Airport and Union Station. It also included large federal spaces like the National Institutes of Health in Maryland, the Pentagon, and the commissary at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. Over the last 50 years, the board's responsibilities have expanded, and most importantly, with the authority to issue minimum guidelines that underpin the ABA and ADA accessibility standards. Now, no one here is going to rest on their laurels. In fact, the Access Board will be the first to tell you that our work is not done. But over the last 5 decades, the Access Board has significant accomplishments, such as issuing minimum guidelines for accessibilities for buildings, sites, transportation vehicles, outdoor areas, and very soon, public rights of way. Issuing and updating standards under Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, which requires digital accessibility in information and communication technologies developed, procured, maintained, or used by the federal agencies. They issued technical ability standards for medical diagnostic equipment and have trained thousands of individuals on accessibility standards and answering thousands of technical assistance requests. And those are a lot of achievements from one of the smallest agencies in the federal government. And one of the reasons that the Access Board has been able to achieve so much with their tiny but mighty staff is the dedication of career federal employees that have supported the Access Board over the last 50 years. There are too many former employees who have contributed substantially to the Access Board's mission to be able to name them all day, but they know who they are and they know the impact of their service. And I believe we have some Access Board employees here today, and if you could raise your hand and wave and show us who you are, and if all of us could help recognize these individuals for their dedicated service. So a lot has changed for the Access Board over the past 50 years, including the composition of the board. I'm proud to say that GSA was one of the original 8 federal departments represented on the board, which now includes representatives from 12 federal agencies, as well as 13 members of the public appointed by the President of the United States, a majority of whom must have a disability. And so I would like to take a moment to recognize the presidentially appointed members of the public who have served on the Access Board over the years, including a person in our hearts now, Judy Heumann, who is a hero of the disability rights movement, who passed away earlier this year. And while the Access Board's composition and authorities, and even our name has changed over the years, the board's core mission has stayed the same for the last 5 decades. And that's to advance accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities. So please join me in a round of applause for the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act and the U.S. Access Board. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's quite interesting to see the historical maturation of the comments and the good work that we're all doing here in this room. So we've been around for a while. Each of you have been around for a while. And for those that are even younger, a lot to follow and a lot to keep moving the ball down the road. So we look forward to all of that. Thanks, Katie. All right. I think, too, tomorrow is the Title II and Title, well, it's actually the anniversary, 33rd anniversary of the Access Board, or strike that. The lawyer in me, sorry about that, of the ADA. Thanks. And the Access Board, as Case alluded to, deals with Title II and Title III of the ADA. And I think we'll hear most comments about that from the general public today, and we look forward to that. So when we celebrate that today, remember it's Title II and Title III of the ADA that we're celebrating, and we look forward to that. On the first anniversary of the ADA, in 1991, we published the ADA Accessibility Guidelines that described design requirements for buildings and facilities in the private and public sector. This accomplished an awful lot and further solidified the Access Board as a leading source of information on accessible guidelines. On the same day, the Department of Justice, and this is very key, also adopted our guidelines as the basis for enforcement and standards, which made the compliance with the requirements mandatory under the ADA. A few weeks later, the Department of Transportation adopted the guidelines and its enforceable ADA standards for the transportation system. This is so important because this is the actual grounding work for the improvement and access compliance for basically a civil rights standard for people with disabilities. We've made significant progress in making our country more accessible over these last 33 years. The Access Board keeps its focus on the work that still needs to be done and make this country a fully accessible place for all. In a few minutes, we're going to hear from our agency staff on the good work that is being done to further achieve access in the United States under the ADA. Please join us in celebrating, again, the 50th anniversary of the Rehab Act and the 33rd anniversary of the ADA. We again appreciate all of that work. So, cheers, everybody. All right. And now I'm going to take a moment to recognize 4 outstanding public board members from the United States Access Board. These folks who are here today, 3 of which are here, outstanding human beings, and proud to call them my friends. I want you to know that these 3 ladies who are here today, and a gentleman by the name of Victor Paena, who is not able to join us today, were the backbone over the last several years of making sure that the United States Access Board carried out the mission and the goal of its intent when it was formed. And I can tell you this, we will miss them. I will miss them, and it's a little lofty to say, but the country's going to miss you and all you've done. And so I want to first recognize Deb Ryan of Boston, Massachusetts, for her service on the board over the last 12 years and for contributing to her technical expertise to numerous rulemaking and board endeavors. So, Deb?
Thanks.
That was my fault, sorry.
Just a moment, we've had a little technical difficulty. Actually, the next person is Karen Tamley. I might be able to do this from Chicago. And yes. Thanks. All right. Karen Tamley was appointed by President Obama, and she was our vice chair in 2023. Over the years, Karen also chaired the design committee and provided public trainings. Karen, the board recognizes you with a recognition of board service. Karen? And next we have Karen Breitmeyer. And Karen was the representative from the Seattle area, Washington State, and for her service since 2010, we want to thank her. Karen's expertise in architecture and leadership in civil rights for people with disabilities social sustainability, and accessibility design have contributed immensely to the board's mission and to its direction. Karen is excellent on the technical skills of how to get buildings and built structures compliant, and she will be truly missed. But we also happen to know she'll be around if we have some questions that we want answered. Karen?
My fault. It was my fault.
You're fine. It's part of the routine. You know, it's interesting too. We also want to say that these 4 board members have also provided support and guidance as we've had a nice change, and as other board members have rolled off, we have new board members, and so our veterans have done a good job at mentoring and helping share what the board's about. So we'd like to thank you to that for them doing that. The last person is Victor Panina, and Victor was also a great member of our board, and Victor was appointed by President Obama, and he served as the Passenger Vessels Committee on that committee, and we're working on guidelines for that, and Victor was a real big help in that, traveled the world, and so he's not able to attend today, but we will miss him and appreciate his efforts with the Frontiers Committee and the emerging exploration that he has supported over the years. So again, thank you, and we appreciate all you've done for us and done for the country. All right. We are now going to move on to the agenda, and I think this is where we're getting a little on the public side. You're probably tired of listening to a lot of us, so I don't blame you. And I want to touch on the agenda for the town hall portion of this. We're going to begin by hearing from our leader, Sachin Pavan, and he is the executive director of our board, and he will provide an overview of the board's functions. Then the Access Board General Counsel, Chris Kaczynski, is going to discuss the board's current rulemaking agenda, and then we're going to turn the event over to hear from you, as we promised. And we will begin with those of you who have pre-registered to speak, and those who have not pre-registered, we will still make sure that you are heard today. So why don't we go ahead and begin with our Executive Director, Mr. Pavan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here in the Charm City. What a great day today so far. You know, I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Beatty for your support and collaboration in making this happen, and also welcoming us to your state. In fact, most of Access Board staff lives in Maryland, so it's always a competition between Virginia, DC, and Maryland, where most of the staff resides. But it is great to be here in Baltimore. I also want to recognize a good friend and a great leader in the disability rights space, President Riccobono, who has done a tremendous job in advocating for the blind and being a strong leader in pushing agendas that needs to be heard all around. And I appreciate, Mark, for your leadership and also opening the doors to us today and welcoming us to this fantastic space. The work that the Federation continues to do is remarkable, and we appreciate the continued collaboration. We heard about how the Access Board came about. You know, we've been in existence for 50 years. As an organization, as an agency, we are a small independent federal agency. We have a staff of about 27 and a governing board of 25. But we have a large mission. Our role is to make sure all spaces are inclusive, and we do that through design and creating accessible design and creating accessible standards and guidelines. Most of the work that we do is what we call rulemaking, so regulatory work, which you'll be hearing soon from my colleague, General Counsel Chris Kaczynski, what rules we are engaged in right now. But we also provide a lot of other services for the rules and the regulations that we develop. We provide technical assistance and training for all those regulations we develop. So all those trainings and technical assistance, you can access that through our website. Our staff are available to answer any technical assistance for our standards and guidelines. So please do reach out to us with any questions you have about standards and guidelines. But we also provide trainings throughout the year, and we archive any webinars that we provide on our website. We want to hear from the public when we engage in these regulatory work. When we work on our rules, there are different stages during our rulemaking process where public can weigh in so that we can take into consideration those important information that informs what our final rule or final regulation looks like. So please pay attention when information is sent out for public comment, because we want to hear from all of you. There are many opportunities such as today to hear from the public. So any chance you get, please do let us know. But even if things do come up during the course of the year, do reach out to the U.S. Access Board. We want to know what's happening in your communities. We want to learn from you what's been successful, but also what needs to change. With the work that we do, with the rules that we make, it is a long process, but it is a process that is informed by many factors, and the public is a critical factor in it. I'm going to turn the time over to our General Counsel to kind of talk about some rules that we are working on right now, and then we'll move on to the next part of the program, which is hearing from all of you.
Thank you, Sachin. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm pleased to talk about 5 current rulemakings that the board is involved in. Again, I can't overstate what a job this is for an agency of our size and resources to be involved in this many rulemakings actively at one time, and the great work that so many people on career folks at the Access Board have been doing. Folks past, present and past, in fact, when it comes to at least one of the things I'll talk about. But the rules are, first, in September of last year, we issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on the accessibility of self-service transaction machines. So guidelines that will ensure the accessibility of self-service transaction machines. Think about machines that are used to purchase tickets, used to increasingly place orders at restaurants. The machines that enable people to independently check out of grocery stores and scan their products. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. There are others as well, but we issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. We received, I think, 84 comments between September and November of last year, and we are in the process of developing a proposed rule for public comment on the accessibility of self-service transaction machines. So again, as Sachin said, try to be aware of what is out there. We do our best to publicize on our website and elsewhere what rules we have in progress so that people do have an opportunity to comment. Public engagement in these rules is critical, and there usually are 60 days within which the public has to comment, and we take seriously the comments. We often revise our proposed rules in light of the comments we receive when we issue the final rules. A second rule in which we're developing a proposed rule concerns the accessibility of electric vehicle charging stations. Now, last year, we issued a technical assistance document on guidelines and recommendations for the accessibility of EV charging stations so that they can be independently accessed, particularly by individuals with mobility impairments. Does the space in which the charger is located have sufficient maneuverability for a person to exit their vehicle and to independently get to the charger and connect, and then conduct their transaction if they need to pay for the service at that at that location. So these recommendations are not enforceable rules, but they, I think, are helpful in understanding what an accessible electric vehicle charging station looks like until we can get final guidelines into place. So this would be a proposed set of guidelines that would be issued on the accessibility of EV charging stations. You may be aware that through federal grants, there are approximately 500,000 EV charging stations that are going to be built nationwide, and the Department of Transportation, in fact, has referred grantees to our recommendations for accessible EV charging stations. Others are going to be built as well, so this is a rapidly developing situation in which the proliferation of these charging stations will take place. A third rule concerns the accessibility of medical diagnostic equipment. Now, under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, that law amended the Rehabilitation Act to give the Access Board authority to issue standards. They're not binding standards, but they're voluntary standards that agencies can adopt, and I think there is interest among more than one federal agency in adopting standards that the Access Board issues on medical diagnostic equipment used in clinical settings. The particular proposed rule that we have issued in May of this year concerns the low transfer height for examination tables and chairs, so that people in wheelchairs can safely and effectively and independently transfer from their wheelchairs to examination tables and chairs. We set a low minimum that they must a low minimum transfer height of 17 inches. We'll see what public comments we receive on that rule, as it has been out since the proposed rule has been out since May of this year. A fourth rule concerns the accessibility of passenger rail vehicles. This is something that we've done rulemaking in the past on, but I believe the rulemaking was several decades ago. They are in need of revision, and there has been an advance notice of proposed rulemaking issued on which we received comments. It is really a matter of where we can put our resources when we are doing 5 rules at once, but these are going to be moving forward. They are on our unified regulatory agenda and will continue to be. There's a 5th rule that Vice Chair Kale alluded to, the public rights-of-way accessibility guidelines. Now, I've been talking about public rights-of-way accessibility guidelines for a long time, but not for as long as they've been in the process of being developed, which has been many, many years. President Riccobono mentioned that sometimes these things move a little bit more slowly, but they happen. Vice Chair Kale said soon they would be out, which is what, very soon. And that was frequently what I would say when people would say, when are they going to be out? Because we didn't necessarily know. I would say they're going to be out soon. Well, so today I can tell you that soon is now, because we just received notice from the Office of Management and Budget, which has to clear rules before they can be published, that our final rule on the accessibility of pedestrian facilities and public rights-of-way has been cleared for publication in the Federal Register. That will happen within the next day or week, however long it takes the Federal Register to publish them. But there are final guidelines on the accessibility of public rights-of-way. And these will cover the accessibility of everywhere that pedestrians go on public rights-of-way that are under the control of state and local governments and under control of the federal government if they're where they are subject to the Architectural Barriers Act. So these will cover both ADA and ABA covered pedestrian facilities in the public rights-of-way, streets and sidewalks, for example, minimum width, and maximum grade for sidewalks so that people in wheelchairs can effectively navigate them, accessibility of streets and intersections, including the installation of audible pedestrian signals, curb ramps, detectable warnings, parking spaces, on-street parking spaces, transit stops that are in the public right-of-way, shared use paths for pedestrians and bicyclists. Anywhere where pedestrians go will be covered by this set of final guidelines. And I'm pleased that, although I haven't been as involved in them as long as many people, I'm sure glad I got to announce the fact that they're final, because they're going to be of great, tremendous assistance to making our country a more accessible place. So with that, I would like to stop and move forward on the agenda. Greg, I guess I'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Chris and Sachi. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. The team here, led by these two gentlemen and all of our other teammates here, do amazing work, and I can't believe the amount of time they put into it for us, for people with disabilities here in America. So another round of applause for them, please. The whole team. All right, now it's time to turn to our main event. We want to hear from you, and I think I'm going to be laying out some rules, please, that we'd like to follow as we conduct a good public meeting. We're going to first, your name will be called. Raise your hand when your name is called, or identify yourself in the most comfortable way for you, and an access board person will bring you the microphone so you can make your comments from your seat or place of where you are right today. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Please hold your 3 minutes. We'll actually help you do that. And once we've heard from everyone, we're good at that. Once we've heard from everyone who pre-registered to speak, we will then move to invite those who did not pre-register for comment, and under the same rules for those comments, etc. But first off, we want to tell you a bit about the work of the Access Board, and we've already done that. Do you have more, Sacha, that you want to? Okay, I didn't think so. I'd be happy to give it to you, though, if you want, whatever you. So anyway. All right, we're now going to go ahead and move in that direction. So who's got the list? Do I have Oh, there it is. Thanks, Phil. All right, our first person today that wants to speak is Paris Bennett. Is Paris with us? Paris, going once, going twice?
No, I think somebody raised their hand back there.
All right, Phil?
No.
Okay. Joseph Castley. Who's keeping the time? Thank you.
I'm going to begin, just introduce myself. My name is Joe Castley. I've been a manual wheelchair user for 53 years since being injured in Vietnam. I have a handout that's being given out to the members of the board. And from the topic on the front of the handout, you can see beds, showers, and other reasons I can't stay in hotel rooms, what the topic is. The current ADA building code has been in effect for 13 years, and after that time, the chances of a mobility disabled person that can find an accessible hotel room is frustratingly, maddeningly low. In June, I took a trip through 4 states. I began by trying to make hotel reservations. The first 6 hotels I contacted told me that they did not have beds that were within a reasonable height that I could transfer into. I finally managed to make reservations at 5 hotel rooms and with roll-in, but only 4 of them had roll-in showers. To demonstrate that this is not just my problem, if you look at pages 2 and 3 on the handout, there are blog entries there from other disabled traveler websites covering a period of 7 years. And there are also photographs of beds in what are represented to be accessible rooms. Folks, the hotels are not going to cooperate with you. They are not interested in helping disabled people, I'm sorry to say. The ODA code, if you look at page 4, you'll see that the ADA code already regulates seat heights in hotel rooms for toilets and shower benches. It's wonderful that I can get on the toilet and the shower, but if I can't get on the bed, the room is pretty much useless. If you notice it in page 4, you'll see what we've done in Maryland. The state law in Maryland, Business Regulation 15-108, sets forth standards for accessible beds with allowance under the bed for the use of a lift, and it requires hotels in this state to begin installing accessible height beds in hotel rooms that are designated as accessible rooms. I'm hoping to be able to circulate this to additional states and have them consider this, but I would think it would be better if there was a standard height adopted by the Access Board. I represented that I reserved 4 hotel rooms with roll-in showers, but in 2 of those rooms, the shower bench that was fixed to the wall was 6 feet from the controls and the wands. So of course, the shower itself was useless to me. Page 5 and 6 of the handout contain the ADA standards for roll-in showers, which are found in Chapter 6, which are very helpful until you get back to Chapter 8, which deals with transient rooms and hotel showers.
Mr. Casley?
Yes.
That took your 3 minutes up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We wish we could give more time, and we have others, so thank you very much.
Can I just ask you to please look, page 9 of my handout has some recommendations for the adoption of some changes, and I hope to stick around and talk to you later. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Benjamin Durbin. Mr. Durbin, we have a speaker coming, or a microphone coming around behind you if you'd like.
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Dubin. 33 years ago, I was in D.C. attending an Alexander Graham Bell Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing convention. And the deaf and hard of hearing have made great strides over the years for accessibility and effective communication. Except here in Maryland, our MARC trains do not provide effective communication for its riders. There's no signage inside the trains announcing what station is coming up. And this has been going on for years. I've been trying to get this changed for probably 10 to 15 years with Department of Transportation, and everybody says it's not our job, or we're putting on new trains, we've upgraded the trains and signage. In Europe, there's not a problem traveling if you're deaf and hard of hearing. There's enunciators on all the trains with great LEDs telling you where the stops are. So I would hope that Maryland would take a lead in this and start to put enunciators, LED signage, there's signage on the cars, the new cars, but they just say MARC and that's it. They don't tell you anything else or where the station stops are. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. David Furlier. David F.E.R. Ligger. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, Mr. William Fields. Here we go.
Good afternoon. Listening to all the talk about accessibility, two things came to mind sitting here. We need to make sure that our transportation system is accessible, because even the paratransit system, although it's connected with the buses definitely need to be upgraded and make it easier for people to get on them. And then as far as buildings are concerned, I always say there's a legal definition of accessibility, then there's a practical definition of accessibility. And there are times in this state where they've spent millions of dollars like to redo the library, but guess what? They forgot to do the bathrooms, which absolutely makes no sense to me. And usually once something like that gets done, it's hard to go back after the fact and redo it. And I think it would make things much easier for people if we have enough foresight to think about things like bathrooms and buildings that are going to be used by the public before they're done, not after the fact, because I think you would save more money that way. Let it cost more in the beginning so you don't have to spend more money than you should have for something we didn't do. But those were the two big things I noticed about accessibility particularly, because it seems like I'm not in the biggest chair in the world, and I can get in most places, but then some places you wonder, who designed this? And you go, okay, they didn't really think before they did it. So that's what I'd like to see us work on. And as you mentioned earlier, you guys are going to be working on sidewalks and pathways, which is another good area to work on. But we definitely have to make buildings more accessible for people and access more accessible for people, so not as many people are isolated, especially since the COVID epidemic, and we don't want too many people isolated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Darren Gladstone, Mr. Darren Gladstone. Darren Gladstone. All right. Mr. Leroy Hanson. Your mic's coming right behind you, sir.
Hello, I'm Leroy Hanson. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I have a topic that now may be history, but let me cover it anyway. I started losing my vision some time ago, and about 5-6 years ago I became dependent on the audible crosswalk signals. At that time, Arlington County had signals that would tell you which street had the walk sign on, such as walk sign to cross Glebe Road. They then, about 2 years ago, started switching to using just a percussive tone. And that tone itself, at 2 different occasions, I stepped into the wrong street, hearing the sound just above my shoulder, not recognizing that it was for another street. So I had contacted the county about saying, gee, this isn't safe. Why don't we go back to what you had? And they said, A, that people who are blind and vision impaired prefer the nonverbal, the percussive signal, and B, that the nonverbal signal is safer. Well, I looked into this and I found that overwhelmingly the blind and vision impaired preferred signals that indicate the name of the street. And I spent my life as a research economist, and some of the area I worked in was risk analysis, and I didn't find any study that evaluated the risk of using a crosswalk signal, an audible crosswalk signal that indicated the name of the street. So I'm not sure where the county got these quote-unquote facts that they were giving me. But finally, the third thing they said is that they were using those signals because of federal requirements. And they sent me a link to the federal requirements, and now this is where I say, this is all history, and maybe you can tell me where things are at right now. But what they sent me had this an equivalence in there that said any jurisdiction that had an audible system that was as safe or safer then the nonverbal signal was safe, was okay, was encouraged to go ahead and use it, or was free to use it. And I asked the county officials about that, and they never got back to me. Now, maybe they haven't done anything because they were waiting for the information that you have just released. And I only hope that what you released will allow Arlington and other communities to use the audible crosswalk signal that indicates the name of the street. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Kathleen Kleiman. Ms. Kleiman?
Hi, my name is Kathleen Kleinman. I'm an advocate and former SIL director, now retired from Pennsylvania, new to Maryland, and I'm living in Rockville, Maryland, and have been working with the pedestrian safety issues in the master plan. I was here with written testimony to urge the final rule on the PROAG, public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, because guidelines means just that. People smile, nod their heads, but they listen to you and take action when they're standards. So thank you for that announcement. Chris, I'm the one who called you about a week ago saying, what's going on? And you inspired me to show up today to say, what's going on? And you're so ready with the answers. Thank you so much. I'll be looking so hard for that. Public access is so critical. The rate of people with disabilities being hurt through crashes on the streets, on the sidewalk. I've been hit in a crosswalk, and I've also been hit on a sidewalk with driveways. That just happened about 2 months ago, where I'm on the sidewalk feeling perfectly safe, and a car coming out of a driveway is watching the traffic, but not watching the sidewalk's traffic, even though he's crossing what's called a sidewalk. And so we need some standards on that. I'm changing my issue. The other thing is, I wanted to mention my access problem is created by the wheelchair manufacturer Permobil. Their minimum height for the wheelchair does not match up with your minimum height with the ADA. My wheelchair will go as low as 19.5 inches. I can't find a toilet to get off and on safely. So there's a gap here. I'm seeing more and more permabils on the streets and sidewalks. Please help us close that gap. I don't think anybody's aware of it except those of us who are dragging around booster seats for toilets. Thank you. Free our people, now.
Thank you very much. Keon Mayo. Keon Mayo.
Hello, I'm Kiana Mayo. I have been a resident of Baltimore City for the last, my whole 40 years, and I'm also one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit that is suing the city for the inaccessible sidewalks. So it's really encouraging that that's one of the things that you guys are going to be addressing, because really it's about people's safety. And as the Kathleen kind of mentioned, I see people all the time just riding in the streets, in some of the most busiest streets here in the city, and even myself just trying to live our lives, going about work, whatever you're doing, and it's really just unfortunate. And some of it is fighting with scooters, people's trash cans, and other things that are really in the walkways. So I really hope we can also maybe get some type of campaign going to educate the public, that I understand you need to put your trash out, but maybe let's not take up the whole sidewalk, because you do not know if someone in some type of mobility device will need to fight with your trash cans to get past. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Iden Mir.
Hi, pleasure to be here. I'm here mostly to bring more to the awareness around effective communication, I think following Benjamin's words before. Regarding effective communication specifically with wayfinding, I'm coming from Israel. There we have in the regulations under the Israeli, if you will, ADA, the specifications around talking signage and audio format of the signage around us. And I believe it's also suitable here. I believe there's room for other formats of the signage around us. We do have it in Braille, which is fantastic, and it's great. But there are other formats that can be done in addition to that. Yeah, and I'm mostly here to bring that to the awareness. There's different technologies for this, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity to say so.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Briassa Moore. Briassa Moore, quick.
Hello, my name is Briassa Moore. I'm originally from New York City, and I moved down here to Maryland in November 2020 along with my family. While I was living in New York City, I would use Accessoride to get around the city. When I learned I was moving to Maryland, I researched what was the equivalent of Accessoride and found mobility. I completed the process and was approved to utilize mobility. My experience with mobility was very difficult from the start. It came to a head when I joined Special Olympics Maryland, playing for Baltimore City. We practice in the Brooklyn section, and many may know it's not the best area to be waiting in for a long time. I was either late to my practices on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, which resulted in numerous times for me to take an Uber just to be in time for practice. There was also times either when I was picked up late around 9 o'clock at night or later from practice with either the coaches, volunteers, or unified partners waiting with me or giving me a ride home. Even when calling to check the status of my ride, some of the call center agents were less than pleasant in assisting me. I will say the service has improved greatly, but it's still a long way to go in making it the best experience possible with those with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rosanna Ortman.
Yep.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronza Othman. I am the president of the National Association of Blind Government Employees. I'm also the president of the National Federation of the Blind of Maryland. With those two entities, we have several thousand individuals who are blind or print disabled or otherwise low vision. First, I want to thank those of you that are here, particularly my friends Sachin, Stephanie, and Chris. It matters that you come into the community. I want to talk about digital accessibility. Technology has become more and more important over the last couple of decades. The Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act is 25 years old, but the world is less accessible from a digital inclusion space than it has been. There is no transparency in terms of Section 508 for federal agencies, no accountability, and therefore no trust. GSA, I'm sorry, Kate, to say it, but is among the worst of the federal agencies. I'm also a federal employee, and I manage an anti-discrimination program for a large federal agency here in Maryland, and much of the problem involves procurement and acquisition governed by GSA, who takes no responsibility whatsoever when the contracts, the entities with which they contract and authorize contracts fail to meet or outright lie about accessibility and Section 508 compliance. Disability is not the barrier that we face every day. The lack of accountability, inclusion, and enforcement is. I am a high-graded employee. I have a doctorate. I have raised children. I run a nonprofit in my spare time. But what I can't do in my job is order a sandwich, pour my own soda, make a photocopy machine, use the phone on my desk, use the phone in a conference room, manage the budget software that I use for over $100 million that I'm responsible for personally, do my timesheet, do the timesheet of my staff, or take numerous trainings. And none of this was a problem, but accessibility has decreased. I have filed well over 3508 complaints, several of them 10 years old, no action on any of them whatsoever. I think it's great to come here and talk about all of the fantastic things that we have done. I think it's fantastic to talk about the ADA and where it has moved us. I think it is disgraceful to not talk about how 508 compliance has gone almost nowhere. And frankly, we're going backwards as a society, backwards as a federal workforce, and backwards as members of the public who use this space, who have to access our government in this way every single day. I'm asking for accountability, I'm asking for inclusion, and I'm asking you all to help us rebuild trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Gabriel Rubenstein.
Good afternoon. My name is David Prater. I'm standing in for Gabe Rubenstein, who couldn't be here today. I'm a managing attorney at Disability Rights Maryland. Disability Rights Maryland is a protection advocacy agency for the state of Maryland. Our work to address the civil rights and human rights of people with disabilities includes addressing the lack of physical access in areas such as housing, transportation, and government access or government programs and services. The state of access in Maryland and Baltimore is poor. There is, as my colleague was just saying, a lack of accountability and a lack of enforcement. I want to highlight some of the challenges that our community members have experienced. Currently, as you heard from Ms. Mayo, there is a suit pending against the Baltimore City for lack of accessibility in the pedestrian right-of-way. The most recent inventory revealed that less than 2% of curb ramps in the city comply with the ADA. Less than 40% of the sidewalks comply with the ADA. And that is 50 years after the Rehabilitation Act and more than 30 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act. Accessibility is not prioritized. Lack of accessible housing remains a huge issue for our community. Most of accessible housing is actually found in federally subsidized housing. However, elevators routinely break down, prohibiting our community from accessing their units. We have heard horror stories of people having to climb flights of stairs on their butts, with their bodies, and on their hands to access their units. The Department of Labor is responsible for ensuring that elevators are in good operating condition, and that is a responsibility that they have abrogated. Finally, you've heard about the crisis in our paratransit system, long wait times, and again, this is compounded by the lack of access in our pedestrian right-of-ways. If you can't use a pedestrian right-of-way, you have to rely on paratransit. Just have an accessible way for people to use and access the community. And finally, I will note that there is a lack of technical capacity on some of our state and local agencies and our state and local enforcement agencies. So I would encourage some outreach, some education about the importance of physical accessibility to these particular agencies who have the responsibility to ensure that these regulations are adhered to and also to ensure enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, make sure somebody gets the spelling of your name, please, for the record. Thanks. All right, Audrey Sellers, please. Sellers. All right. Dominic Sessa.
Hello, my name is Dominic Sessa. I'm here in Maryland, but I live on the eastern shore, and especially on the lower shore, the resources are very sparse. If you want to advocate for yourself or you need a resource, it doesn't exist easily. Our paratransit, like many have said, it's bad, but it's even worse in the rural communities. You can't reach out to our paratransit specifically. You get told. My experience with it has been very poor. Our buildings, you often can't go in. And I think anyone with a disability understands the experience of waiting out front while their friend who is able to go in the store or the building can. And that's often here. I often have to drive in the streets. And another issue I think is very specific to where I live is broadband access. The county next to me, Somerset, is actually the poorest county in Maryland. And how do we reach disabled individuals there if they don't have broadband? And if the brochures we print are in large print, how do we reach out to them? Well, not only are disabled people facing barriers, and we're also facing barriers in the rural communities because we can't access broadband or resources. And as a power wheelchair user, I understand. And two, another issue is the disability community is diverse. We have the rate of children that are non-native speakers with disabilities is rising. And it's hard, again, to reach out for these resources that we need. I've had issues with my own disability because I have a rare disease and I have to travel 3 hours. A lot of people, our primary care is not accessible, again, because ADA compliance does not equal accessibility. And to me, I think one of the most important things is to see disabled people thrive. And whether it's making my wheelchair so I can function independently or being able to reach out to individuals in an accessible format like an email, it does not always exist. And I think these are issues that are maybe a part of the ADA loophole, but they often keep us chained in ways. My disability is not my issue. It's the inaccessibility that surrounds me.
Thank you. Anu Singleton.
My name is Anu Singleton, and I'm a Baltimore City resident for 34 years. I'm here to tell you about my experience with public transportation, how it does good for me, how it does bad for me, and everyone in between. When I was a young child, my mom taught me how to take the public bus, and I've been taking it ever since. But not just the buses, I also take Metro Subway and the light rail as well. Sometimes it's a good thing to take public transportation. It can get you to your destination in no time flat. But sometimes there's always been a downside with taking public transportation in most experience. For instance, when I take the bus, it doesn't take me where I need to go right away. It does make other stops. Sometimes I wait for a bus. Sometimes it can always be overcrowded with passengers, causing me to wait for another one, even if I leave my home early. Sometimes they make detours, causing me to be a little late or where I need to be at. or when the bus breaks down, I have to wait for another one. I even have some good bad experiences inside, while riding inside a bus. When I sit or stand on the bus, I just mind my own business. People don't bother me, I don't bother them. But sometimes I don't like being in buses that are overcrowded, people being dramatic, don't follow the rules, like playing the radio without headphones or earbuds, or smoking or vaping while on the bus. I never had any bad experience with the light rail or metro. They always sometimes get me into a certain station on time, but even if I take the train, I still have to transfer to a bus at that certain train station. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bonnie Line Swear.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Sweenor. I am the director of the Johns Hopkins Disability Health Research Center. Our mission is to use data to change the paradigm from living with a disability to thriving with a disability. Our work has included using data to examine and understand the accessibility of transit systems, of education, of the process of applying for food stamps or SNAP, of spaces in healthcare, and much more. And what that work has taught us is the tight link between data and equity. And as many here have indicated, we have a data problem around accessibility. There's far too little data on the accessibility of spaces, places, policies, procedures. And without that data, it is hard to move forward. It is hard to hold up accountability, to make change, and to democratize that information so that the community can make change. So I ask that the Access Board consider a bigger investment in the accessibility, or the data of accessibility. So that would include creating new indicators and metrics of accessibility, making sure they're part of national surveys and structures, developing new data infrastructure to share that information, dashboards, portals, other ways to democratize and share that information in accessible ways, and to think of new strategies to collect accessibility data. We need this data in real time, and we should leverage technology to capture that information. All of those approaches need to be developed in partnership with the disability community and understanding in forums like this, and to advance equity and recognize that gaps in accessibility vary, just as comments were made before, by where you live, by race, ethnicity, gender identity, and so many more other groups that face additional barriers. So data really does need to be a priority to help to drive things forward. Maryland does a great job, the Department of Disabilities, on collecting data and has been an exemplar in disability data in many places. But still, progress is needed on accessibility data. Again, without that information, it's hard to make change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Raymond Torrent. Raymond Torrent. Okay. Carol Tyson. Carol Tyson. Paula Yurka. Paula Yurka. Carlton. Okay.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Carlton Walker, and I serve as the director of the Maryland Bridges Technical Assistance Center. We provide information, support, and guidance to blind and low vision transition age students, their families, educators, service providers, and community allies. We help these individuals overcome obstacles they or their students face. Not surprisingly, a major obstacle is technology-related accessibility throughout education and employment. Digital presentations of text and graphical information rank high among these concerns, because they often contain a great deal of text-based information that is not accessible for blind and low vision individuals. Think Zoom meetings with screen sharing and PowerPoints. Slide presentation best practices exacerbate this problem. Presenters are admonished, don't read the slide, so they purposely omit at least some of the visually accessible information, and that remains not accessible non-visually. Unfortunately, the public at large does not understand the problem. Most outside the accessibility community believe either one, all digital content is accessible, or two, making such content accessible will cost a great deal of time and money. Of course, neither is true. We need explicit rules requiring access to all text. The U.S. Access Board is uniquely qualified to educate and empower entities to bring full accessibility to all digital informational presentations. Evidence of the U.S. Access Board's diligence is evident in the Social Security Administration's Work Incentive Seminar event, WISE On Demand webpage. That resource links users to 26 seminar topics dating back to 2020. Each contains links to the presentation, the transcript, and the video. There are counterexamples, and the most disappointing is the Department of Homeland Security's 16 job description videos posted 2 weeks ago, which contain no voiced text, full text, only music. Access to information. I told my husband about this, and he remarked, well, they probably don't want blind people applying for those jobs. Certainly this was the message blind and low vision job seekers get. Hopefully it is not the message DHS means to send. Access to information is a civil right, and it should never be a bridge due to disability. Thank you for your past and future efforts to secure this civil right.
Thank you very much. Justin Young.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Justin Young. I work as a Government Affairs Specialist at the National Federation of the Blind, and it's a pleasure to have you here in our building today. One thing that I'd like to make comment on is related to accessible prescription labeling for medicine. About 10 years ago or so, the Access Board did a report on this topic, and it covered a variety of recommendations and suggestions that impact disabled people who use these products. Several states are currently adopting legislation that is working on this topic, including Maryland, who just passed a bill a few months ago, and it goes into effect in later this year in the rulemaking process in the state of Maryland. I would encourage that the Access Board reevaluate that report that was issued about 10 years ago, see what can be updated, or what recommendations are being incorporated, and what ones that have not been, and look into why they have not been implemented. Also, medical devices for blind people are not visually accessible, and these can be products classified under the FDA under class 2 or 3, which are typically continuous glucose monitors, blood pressure machines, and home dialysis to help blind people independently use these medical products on our own, so we can manage our health products the way that we can, so we can live the lives that we want independently. And I hope that the Access Board would work with us on these topics and look into this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, that concludes the part of the questions or actually comments who have been signed in. We'll now move to the signed in, the non-signed in person. I'm going to have this gentleman right here in the blue shirt.
Yeah, maybe.
Make sure you tell me your name, sir,
Yeah,
please.
my name is Ross Doloff, and I moved here from Boston a while ago. And when I first got here, I wondered if what people were doing in terms of access issues. And I went to the Baltimore Banner, local newspaper, and talked to them about doing an article about access, which they did, and the reporters who did it are here. And a couple of things occurred to me as I was going through the process of putting that together. I had a couple of issues, specific issues about handicapped access to different things here. One is there's a ferry that goes across the harbor that is considered part of the public transportation system, and I think that needs to be accessible. And it's not. They have some boats that are accessible and they have some that aren't. And they don't really use the accessible ones on the part that goes directly across the harbor. And there's also, I think there needs to be some sort of a railing on the harbor front, the walkway, to keep people from going into the water. I use a wheelchair and I actually use a seat belt to use the wheelchair. And so if I fell in the water, I would end up at the bottom of the fucking harbor. So I think there has to be something that allows people not to fall into the water along the railing, and that should be considered an access issue too. And then there's access to outdoor dining, some of which is accessible and some of which is really not. And so I think that needs to get addressed too. And then there's a couple of things that are like outside of these kind of norms of what this hearing is about, and that is, I think that more generally that handicapped restrooms, there should be separate handicapped restrooms as opposed to stalls in bathrooms, because if you go out and you need help in the bathroom and you go out with somebody of the opposite sex, you don't actually, somebody has to go into the wrong bathroom. So what the standard needs to be like family, disabled, separate bathrooms from what is otherwise available. And then there's another thing, which is when it comes to hotel rooms and accessible bathrooms, and actually hotel rooms and other places where there are public accommodation issues, I think that there is stuff that people do that is focused on use of their feet, but a lot of times people like me who had a stroke both have issues with their walking and also issues with their hands. So the way bathroom setup should be is that there needs to be.
I think that was the 3 minutes. So thank you for your comments, sir. I appreciate it. Gentleman in the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Tisha Guthrie. I'm an advocate for affordable housing, but I'm also a social worker, and I live in Poppleton, which is a part of West Baltimore. And I just have a couple of comments. The first thing I'd like to mention is that in West Baltimore, we have a stop for the MARC train. And West Baltimore is a very disenfranchised community. It's the home of redlining. And to make a correlation between that and accessibility, the MARC train stop in West Baltimore is one of the only stops where there is literally no adherence to the ADA. So that's a real problem. Basic services such as maintaining sidewalks, safe sidewalks, pruning of trees, shoveling of sidewalks after the snow, installing and updating pedestrian signals. Neglecting these basic services are barriers to accessing our city and fully participating in civic life. So these are issues for not just the population at large, but they create deep barriers for those with disabilities. Baltimore is a city which is experiencing unyielding atrophy. We are at our lowest population in over 100 years. As this country continues to age and more people experience some challenges to their ability during their lifetimes, addressing basic factors that continue to make what is already a place that is challenging to live and accessible is going to continue to contribute to Baltimore's declining population. And just one basic example of how oversight and really hearing what the population has to say, not translating to action. I was the vice president for GACAT, which is Consumer Advisory Council for Accessible Transportation here in Baltimore. And in 2016, the head of the MTA Transit came and spoke to us, and we made clear to him, or I made clear to him, that the Metro subway had no accessibility on the trains for people in mobile chairs. Just like on the buses, you have the opportunity to collapse the chairs so that someone in a wheelchair or in a mobile chair can safely secure themselves while the bus is in motion. There is nothing like that on Metro subway, and that is abhorrent. So
I'm gonna have to.
So our voices need to be heard, and what we say needs to translate into action. Not just check a box that community has been heard, but actually hear us and do something about it.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to have to take one more. I hate to do this, but this is our last one. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Sir.
Hi, this is Jesse Sherrick. I'm with the Government Affairs Department in the National Federation of the Blind. I want to talk to you. We appreciate the work that you've done on transportation over the years. Transportation is a huge issue in the blind community. Growing up blind, obviously didn't qualify for a driver's license. With the advent of rideshare, we thought things were going to really improve. However, we're finding that there's a ton of discrimination in the blind community, especially to individuals who use service dogs, including my wife. There's a number of other reasons why rideshare doesn't necessarily always meet our needs. But right now, we're really excited about the advent of autonomous vehicle technology. The National Federation of the Blind, our president, is testifying at an autonomous vehicle hearing in the House on the anniversary of the ADA. And it seems like it's a great time for you to be working on guidelines to make autonomous vehicles accessible to the blind and disabled community in terms of finding the vehicle, calling for an autonomous vehicle, ensuring that the vehicle is accessible while you're riding in the vehicle, and making sure that your destination is accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have someone who has signed up, and we did not get her on the sheet. Can we have that individual?
Great, thank you so much. My name is Donna Sauerberger. I'm an orientation and mobility specialist, teaching people who are blind how to get around. And as a member of the excuse me, Environmental Access Committee of the Orientation Mobility Division of AER, also I've been involved with the Access Board starting about 30 years ago, so I'm really very pleased. I have one thing to talk about, which is having the pedestrian signals being made accessible here in Maryland. I'm working right now with an 89-year-old woman who walks a couple miles every day. She has macular degeneration and was unable to access the signal. So what she was doing before I came to train her is cross this 5-lane highway in the middle of the block because she didn't know how to do it. We discovered to our horror that she was not able to recognize that there was a car coming until it was a few seconds away. So she was really putting herself at risk. In fact, the day I arrived at her home, a pedestrian was hit there where she had been crossing. So we need our pedestrian signals to be accessible. But I'm going to go one step further because one of the previous speakers talked about having pedestrian signals in the first place, and I realize that the Access Board is not responsible for making something accessible that's not there. But I just want to speak, and I hope that the people here in Maryland and Virginia will listen to the fact that we are kind of unique. When I talk to orientation mobility specialists in California, they're shocked. In fact, they didn't believe me when I told them that some of our signals, our actuated signals, do not have pedestrian signals. And if a signal is actuated, it means that it will hold the signal green long enough just for the vehicles to get out, and sometimes that's 7 seconds. Joe Schenkel was in Virginia and crossing from his home, where he goes all the time, to a restaurant to meet his National Federation of the Blind members who were planning to advocate the next day. And he heard, I'm assuming he heard a vehicle coming out of the street beside him. He assumed the light was green, and he didn't even make it to the median strip before it was over. A driver passed by, saw him waiting there with his cane at the median strip, went to turn around and come back and help him, but by that time he had stepped out and was killed. So, and in my own community in Crofton, the schools, when my children went to school, the schools are right outside. It's surrounded by 3 highways, and the schools are right outside that highway. And the only way for kids to get home after the guard leaves is to go down to a signal that has no pedestrian signal. So we really need Maryland and Virginia to get on board and make all intersections provide this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody who is registered that hasn't gotten to speak yet?
That's me.
Ma'am?
Okay, I'll try to be very quick.
Take your time.
My name is Elisha Everett Burns. I'm the CEO and founder of Friendly Like Me. And as part of our mission, we are attempting to map accessibility data at a very, very granular level. I was listening to our colleague over here from the NIH, and this is a big, big deal, not having access to the data. In fact, I would call it maybe one of the last data frontiers, accessibility information. And as all of you know, millions of people struggle to gain access. And those places include healthcare, right? Not just entertainment venues and the like. So what we're trying to do is to crowdsource this information, but it's not enough. It's too slow, and we need your help. Participation is critical to our well-being, and what our users tell us is that they very often choose to stay home because they don't know if they can participate. And so having that information in advance is incredibly crucial, and that's what we're trying to do. But because enforcement of the ADA is such a thorny issue, I think that we maybe need to consider switching it to an incentive-based system, especially for small businesses who really need help figuring out how to make their spaces, their physical spaces, accessible. And the ADA is, of course, the foundation of the standards that we need, but we really need to expand them. They don't fully cover the difference between a standard wheelchair user and a power wheelchair user. It certainly doesn't contemplate the very many people of size who have access issues as well. And this country has significant issues in getting people to be able to participate in society, but I would like to also make the point that that's the economy as well. When you add in people of size to the numbers of people with access issues, you're talking about 1 in 3 Americans, not 1 in 4. And their participation in the economy is pretty critical. So we need your help. And I think that it may not ever be an enforcement issue that can get down to that level of granularity. So we're trying to make that data available. I'm very interested in the work that you're doing. And thanks for receiving me here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. As next person is Audrey. Is there Audrey?
Hi. Yes, this is Audrey Sellers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you.
I'm from Disability Rights Maryland. I also have the pleasure of working with some CARS members, Consumers for Accessible Ride Services, including Floyd here. I'm here today to talk about the issues with accessibility on MTA, mobility. There are varied issues in terms of the vehicles being able to, and the staff knowing how to secure individuals in wheelchairs correctly and safely without injury to those users. There are myriad issues with on-time pickup, such that folks who rely on dialysis end up losing their seats at the clinic because they can't get to dialysis consistently. Or as one CARS member was left in downtown Baltimore until 3 in the morning, waiting for her ride back from a dinner with a friend. We live in a city. This is a dangerous problem to have for many reasons, and I hope that something changes before serious harm comes to somebody. With these transportation issues, there's also, we're seeing now micro-mobility filling in those first mile, last mile barriers to getting where you need to go. As somebody with muscular dystrophy, I have not, I've been disappointed in the micromobility offerings that I've seen, cropping up here with Lime, there with Spin, a ton of startups, but nobody seems to have an option for the people who seem to have these transportation barriers the most. So I encourage the U.S. Access Board to focus on accessibility within micromobility as this industry gains steam.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for your comments. We want you to know the Access Board listens. We have good notes done electronically, digitally, and we'll be able to compile that for ourselves for continued reference to your comments. That does conclude today's meeting, and I want to thank everyone who participated in today's access comments and questions, etc. We really do know that accessibility, true accessibility, is the result of hard work, and it's the Access Board's commitment to keep working towards it. And we are honored to be alongside each and every one of you as you have articulated particular items and needs, and we will be looking into them and carrying on with our duties. So on behalf of the entire Access Board, thank you very much for your time and efforts today. We certainly appreciate it. The good news is we want to now invite you to all stay for a networking event right next door from 3:30 to 4:30. We cut into that a little bit because we want to hear all of you. And as a result, refreshments will be served. Snacks have been provided by the Maryland Department of Disabilities, and we want to thank you for that and appreciate that. So without further ado, the Access Board meeting is adjourned, and we look forward to seeing everyone next door at the sponsored session for networking, etc. Thank you.